So let me get into my more condescending voice because I really have to harness my inner condescension when we go into this next segment. And without further ado, here it is.
Are we smarter than us? Hey, are we just supposed to take it, or do we like kind of?
We kind of have to take it for a minute, and this is what I've been doing my whole life. I let him feel heard, and I don't really.
I'm more of like the interrupting cow.
Yeah, let him talk. Let him talk. Let's see what he has to say.
So our bodies, we have here. We always kind of have this like this spiritual like thought of like this is all this piece, this chunk, this toe, right? This is all like mine. And for the time being it is, but initially we've actually all these atoms and these molecules that make up our bodies have come from somewhere. Where do you think they came from, Paul?
Typically God, but I don't think that's where you're going today.
Well, I think for sure we can get into the spiritual aspect of it, right? But what I'm basically talking about is everything we have in here we've gotten from like an animal, right? So like
what do you mean from an animal?
From an animal or a plant, right? So all these molecules that make up our bodies, like our proteins and our freaking arms and our muscles, right? Where do you get protein from? Chicken, right? Right, chicken. So you're eating chicken. So this part of your body is freaking chicken. Every part of your body is either coming from like something around you, right? And a lot of the things that have built your body up is like the fuel you've eaten, right? So like every part of our body comes from a plant or an animal that's helped build up our body, right? And like chicken, for example, right? What are chickens eating to build them up so that we can...
Seeds.
They eat seeds. But if you've been around a lot of chicken...
Worms.
Yeah, worms and freaking bugs, dude. They eat bugs.
So we're made up of worms.
Spiders and stuff. So the next time you see a really good-looking girl, you see them curves, just think like what percentage of them curves is spider? Because there's probably a high percent.
Are chickens eating spiders?
Chickens eat spiders, oh yeah.
Yeah, I would assume they do.
I have to ask the farmer.
Yeah.
You guys had chickens?
I think they just but I think they just, anything that's on the ground, they can peck their little beak on.
Yeah.
Like that little Hawaiian Disney movie where that chicken, he's just always pecking things.
Moana?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think
Hey was that chicken's name.
Yeah.
I feel like when I've been around a lot of like I feel like in Mexico, I was around like a lot of chickens and it seems like they were always looking for bugs.
So sounds like you spent a lot of your time going, how much of that?
No, for sure. You're thinking about it.
Dirty little chicken.
Yeah.
Well, in Chuk, they would eat dogs. So I guess I would be saying how much? Because dogs eat their own vomit, right? So it's like, how much of that person was made up of vomit?
People listening don't know what Chuk is.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
What is it in Chuk? Where is that?
Out in Micronesia.
Okay.
Sorry, it's one of the 4 islands of Micronesia. Kosrae, Pohnpei, Chuk, and Yap make up the Micronesian island.
Captain Cook.
Well, they make up the Federated States of Micronesia, because then there's also Palau and Kosrae, I think, is part of the Marshall Islands. I could be wrong. I don't know. Can't remember anymore. The Marshall Islands, like, they don't like to be lumped in with Micronesia anymore because they just want to be there on Marshall Islands. But I think a lot of people still call them part of Micronesia.
It's like England with like Britain and Europe, you know? Yeah, he wants to be done. They want to be done. Yes. I don't know if they actually do. I think they somewhat want back, but it's a whole thing.
So back to your talk about like we come from seeds or animal, right?
Yeah.
But like, where does because are you just saying like the circle of life or what?
It's kind of a circle of life, right? But I mean, eventually you're going to trace it back to like if like the scientific side of it, you're looking back to a star, right? Like freaking exploding, creating carbon and oxygen and nitrogen, all these elements that existed within like a star once upon a time, you know?
No.
You're not into that.
Getting deep.
No, it's not. And it's like, that's actually a weird thing because there's 1-cell organisms, bacteria, right?
Uh-huh.
What do they call 2-cell organisms?
That's a great question.
It's the reason you're confused, because there's not. They don't exist.
Well, I mean...
It doesn't exist.
So there's no double...
There's no double. So
it's either multi...
So this belief that we were 1 cell... And then we grew into a 2, and then a 3, and then a 4, and now I don't know what a human is, but whatever, how many cells, right? It doesn't exist. We have a 1 cell, and then we have million cell organisms. But
no, I think there's
between It doesn't exist. And so how do we sit and say that it started like this and then grew into this? It didn't grow into this, clearly, because
but there's million cell organisms and there's billion cell organisms, and that every organism has different amount of cells. You and I have different amount of cells.
Sure, but how come there's a 1 cell organism, but then there's not a 2 or a 3 or a 4 or a 5 or a 6? Well, it's like this big, huge gap between the two.
But I think the process, I mean, there's like a lot of like science that you can get into this, right? But I think the process to like creating another cell is either like meiosis or mitosis, right? So that's either
split, right?
They're either split, or meiosis is like that's the
merging.
That's the boy girl one. Yeah, that's the merging one, right? And so I think once they split, you're programming to split. They're gonna keep splitting. It's like you can't tell something it can split, and then once it splits, like, man, that was amazing. You can't split anymore, right?
Sure.
Like that's a hard thing to ask of a 2-celled organism.
If bacteria, for example, splits, shouldn't there be a 2-cell at some point before it then gets excited and splits to a 4 and then an 8 and then a 16 and then a 32?
Yeah.
There's a problem. I'm just telling you, there's a big problem. Kind of like landing on the moon. There's a big problem. Like, you can't just keep claiming this crap, because there's a big problem.
See, and I actually am. So when I get into this stuff, I like to. It has to see this argument. I think is like, it's tough for me to grab onto a lot, because there's probably a million reasons if we spent 2 seconds on Google seeing why we're not finding 2 and 3 cell organisms out there. There's probably a lot of reasons why, but we haven't delved too far into it. But I actually really appreciate the idea of evolution, right? Because where I'm grounded in is like, people talk about like afterlife, and you and I, all three of us have spent a lot of time with religion, on missions and after that. But people talk about the afterlife, and there's like some people have this idea of heaven of like, just like this perfectly easy resting spot where you can just chill all day. And doesn't that sound, that sounds freaking miserable to me. One reason I love evolution is it's like, hey, there's a constant need to like improve, to grow, to develop, to change, right? And I think that to me is something that's like core within me. So that's why I have zero beef with the idea of evolution that way.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, when I think of heaven, it's got to be happy. And usually when you're doing something hard and you accomplish things, you're happier than like chilling on the beach.
Let me put it out a better way, okay? There's an episode on The Twilight Zone where this guy gets, I can't remember if he won a wish or magical power, but anyway, he gets the dream of his life. Like whatever he wants, he gets it. So what he wants is to live in this huge penthouse in Vegas and gamble and win and have women and like just live it up, right? The Vegas lifestyle. So he gets it, and first day he goes down to the casino, and every time he does the roulette thing, it lands on whatever number he's getting every time. And he's just living it. It's awesome, right? Goes up that night, he's rich. Any lady he approaches wants him.
Here's your nails.
Awesome. Yeah, here's your nails.
I gotcha. How many you need?
But by day 3, when he's playing roulette, and he's never a loss, right? He never loses. How fun is roulette?
Mm-hmm.
It's not fun. There's no excitement. There's no anticipation. There's no unknown, right? And so it becomes very boring. And every time I walk up to a woman and she wants me, there's no excitement there either, right? And so quickly he learns that
in the
just
story,
getting,
not in your real life, because
but in the story, you quickly learn that without opposition, what happiness, right? Roulette, for example, it's no longer fun, because every time I pick black 5, it hits black 5. Every time I hit red 18, it hits red 18.
So to play devil's advocate here, right? Because I agree with you. If opposition and failure at any level is an option, are we God's failed batch? Like, are we a God experiment to like improve
him?
And he's like,
what you're saying?
Yeah, and we're like, this is a failure, right? Like, is humanity a failure?
No.
Yeah.
That's an interesting question to ponder.
I'm just getting those wheels turning.
Yeah.
I don't know. Dude, that's a weird question. But I have pondered what you were kind of saying, is like, is there really any happiness to be in heaven if everything's just happy?
I think it's going to work itself out. I think you're just going to have, that's when I'm happy. This is when I'm doing something hard and I accomplish it.
Yeah. Yeah. But progression, right? Like,
maybe there's times of rest. I don't know. It'll be interesting. If I get there, because I'm planning on going down. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, you got to start from the
The
bottom.
mistakes you talked about, those nail mistakes.
Nobody wants to start a game at the end, right? Like you want to like begin at the beginning, so you got to go. You got to go to the bottom.
No one's playing Mario if you're just running straight the whole time.
What's the opposite? What's the opposite of the story I just told? Where like every time you spin the wheel,
you lose.
Yeah, so it's just you lose.
Yeah, you just lose. That's
just lose. It's because the same way the happiness would just fade away. Like
Well, the hope, the despair. I think despair.
If every time is just lost, does it just become like not a big deal?
You think that's what hell is like?
Yeah,
I think you feel like you're constantly losing your money.
I don't know because if all you know is that, does it even bug you?
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, I just don't think there's like I think it becomes like a callous thing, right?
Yeah,
like it's the opposite effect, right? Like you're like, well, I'm not going to win, so why try?
Yeah.
Right?
Like every day I wake up, I stub my toe.
To
whatever,
nothingness.
I brush my teeth now.
Yeah.
That's what always happens.
Yeah.
So to that point, there is no misery.
I
think that the growth pattern still has to exist. The chance of getting out of hell has to exist. And so it's that climb that makes you miserable, that dang it, I almost made it and then I didn't. And so now you're miserable again. Like you can't I mean, our brains aren't functioning to understand the ways of God anyway, but it's a little hard to understand this, like you're just in hell and that's that.
Yeah, it's like final.
Yeah,
like there's not another chance of like working your way back up. I don't know.
Yeah, I do know, but I'm going to let you guys develop eventually. Yeah, that's part of it.
Next pod, you tell us.
No, little by little.
He's spoken to the 2-cell organisms and he knows.
Yeah, there's like, I mean, it's just tough when you, like you mentioned, right? Like your brains aren't ready to compute it.